This is Gran Turismo 7, the latest entry in the series, boasting the most advanced physics model. And today, we're going to put that to the test by trying to get to the end credit screen in a single gear. Reverse. Now there are a lot of races standing between us and our goal, and they're not all going to be basic ovals that we can just wall ride around. We're going to have to somehow navigate racetracks, street circuits, even dirt, and somehow snow. And if all of that wasn't tough enough, we're also going to be forced to use many different car types. Now the easiest type to use in reverse will be a rear engine car, with its weight over and power going down to the rear wheels. In reverse, that makes it the closest thing we're going to get to a front wheel drive car. But as the engine starts moving further and further towards the front, it becomes more and more likely that we're going to suffer some sort of pendulum effect, making the car much harder to control. The worst of these options is a front wheel drive car, as it basically becomes like a Widowmaker Porsche that also steers from the rear wheels. While four wheel drives may also suffer some of this, we can push a lot of that power to the rear wheels, negating some of the negative effects. The last feature to cover is the difficulty. Now anything we complete on hard gets a gold medal, silver for normal, and bronze for easy. Any event we're unlucky enough to fail gets a red. Enough describing though, let's get started. First event, Sunday Cup. Car of choice, engine swapped Beetle. Is it overpowered? Most definitely. But we're here to get the hang of things, not play fair. Ripping the handbrake as soon as the race begins to spin our car around, ready for reverse, sets us off at a bit of a disadvantage. But with our excessive power, it doesn't take long until we've caught up to the grid and begin making our way towards the front, even if we're barely hanging on to control. Eventually at the start of the fourth lap, we take the lead, and after that, it's a straight shot to the finish. Claiming victory in our first race, and shortly afterwards, we complete the other two races, bringing to completion the Sunday Cup. Next up is the Sunday Cup Classic, and wouldn't you know it, we can keep the Beetle. This time, it's at Laguna Seca, a track much more complex than the ovals it tackled earlier, but the Beetle proves itself competitive, as it easily makes short work of its opponents, climbing its way into first place before the second lap even begins. Now with a clean shot to the finish, that's where it all went wrong, as it slides off one side of the track. Somehow on my recovery, I ended up on the other side of the road, and then in a panic to get going, I reached for a second, non-existent, reverse gear, chucking the car into first and bringing it screeching to a halt. Now if we weren't so overpowered, that would have been the end of the race. But with sheer power, we managed to snatch victory back, just as we crossed the line, bringing us yet another victory. And with that, the Sunday Cup Classic is also complete. Next up is the European Sunday Cup, and surprise surprise, the Beetle is eligible, but I want to mix it up a bit. So we're taking this, an engine swapped Samba Bus. Now, why take a Samba Bus when we have a Beetle that's performing perfectly adequate? Well, that's because a little bit later on, the competition is going to really ratchet up. So we need to experiment to figure out what works and what doesn't, so we can remain competitive. And also, I wanted to drive a Samba Bus in reverse. The Samba Bus is slowly making its way towards the lead, although it is performing much more poorly than the Beetle. And from a guess, this is a couple of things. Number one, we have no nitrous. And number two, I think the reverse gear on this vehicle is exceptionally long, which is having a negative effect on our acceleration. But with the opponents still being so low quality, we managed to limp our way into first place and claim yet another victory. So with that, the European Sunday Cup is also complete. At this point, I think it's time for our first championship. It's 2 races at the high speed ring, and we're sticking with our Samba Bus. We've given it some nitrous, so now it's time to find out just how long that reverse gear really is. To do that without the fear of anything getting in our way, we need to take the Samba Bus all the way from the back, right up to the front of the grid. Move! Entering the second half of the first lap, our Samba Bus manages to make it to a podium spot, and by the time we hit the final straight, it's claiming first. Now, let's find out what it's capable of. The current world record for reversing is 171.34 miles per hour. Samba Bus, that's your target. 280, 285, 289. And if you use miles per hour, then that is 180. Well done, Samba Bus. You're a world record holder. Disappointing. Honestly, I was hoping to beat that record for a second time. But with the track being wet, that's probably out of the question. What we can do is use this race for a test. What sort of traction are we going to get when reversing in wet weather? The water appears to make the car's flaws a little bit more pronounced. But honestly, it's not bad. We're even going to give that high-speed record another test. Nope, not going to make it. Abort. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you do a planned and controlled drift in reverse. I need new pants. I can't let fear get the better of me. It's time to try the front-wheel drive Cup. And our car of choice is the Honda Integra. Now it's time for us to find out if these cars are as uncontrollable as I believe they are. That did not go well. Neither did that. And again. I think by now, you're getting the point. Turns out there's a little bit of a technique to getting these things around the track in one piece. Use brute force to overtake every car on the straight, then basically lift off and roll around any corner you come across. Boring? Yes. But successful? Also yes. Front-wheel drive Cup? Complete. Next up is the Japanese rear-wheel drive 450 Performance Point Cup. And it's here that we discover a car very important to our run. The quad-rotor RX-7. This car has boatloads of power and what appears to be a never-ending supply of grip. It becomes apparent pretty quick that bringing a car of this performance level to go up against these opponents is just flat out mean. The RX-7 takes no time at all to get to the front of the pack. At that point, it becomes unstoppable, no matter how poorly I drive, as it crosses the finish line all alone for a very comfortable win. Clearly that cup was too easy, so let's keep going with the RX-7, right into the 550 performance point Japanese Clubman Cup, where we quickly determine that there is no challenge to be found here either. To show how easy this is, RX-7, it would be great if you could rub it in by somehow waving at our opponents as you fly by. That's my car. In no time at all, we've made it to a podium spot. And shortly afterwards, we make a move on first. So we'll just legitimately sneak through this part of the track. Shut up. And so with that wonderful move, we end up coming across the finish line in first place. The RX-7 continues to clean up races, until eventually we move on to the American 600 Performance Point Sunday Cup. Clearly we can't use the RX-7 for that, so regrettably we have to change car. Luckily for us though, we have a Dodge Challenger, all ready to go. Okay, the RX-7 was a great performer, but this car here is just plain entertaining. I kid you not, you can drift it. Now I'm not sure if it's having a long wheelbase or some other factor, but it's just so easy to retain control with, meaning I could have fun and still make progress. Case in point, at the start of the second lap, without any fight at all, we rob third place of its position and begin to track down the remaining 2 places. By the time the final lap rolls around, a battle has been brewing between the top 3 positions. Eventually second place loses a small amount of traction, but that was all it would take to put him out of the fight. And now it's a battle of 2. Us versus a Dodge Viper. We come onto the bridge side by side, but with us having the inside line, that's all we need to take the lead. And with just a long straight remaining, there is no place remaining for that Viper to make a move. This race is ours. And well, not just this race, but the entire championship as well. But this is where it gets interesting. Our next championship is the Japanese 4-Wheel Drive Cup, a series with both dirt and snow tracks. So this is the car that I've chosen, one of the few 4-wheel drives that does not have a rally pedigree. Alright GTO, I really hope you're ready for this. Let's see how we get on. We learned pretty quick that traction is a rare commodity here, and if trying to drive in reverse wasn't complicated enough, just wait until you have to try and counter steer. Trying to remember all of that reverse controls kinda broke my brain, and even when done correctly, it was so easy to overcompensate and end up spinning in the other direction. So we learned pretty quick that front wheel drive rules apply here. Power on the straights and be cautious on the corners. And with those rules in place, we begin to make progress. Just look how excited this GTO is to be taking part. Cars? As we approach the final straight, a WRX gets in our way. Sorry for the nudges, but to try and turn around you is a death sentence. We have to be so incredibly cautious on this unstable surface. But eventually, we get a good line set up, powering our way forward and into battle for the top positions. The battle continues into the final lap, and it's so risky for us to fight here, as the slightest touch from an opponent will send us spinning out of control. Eventually though, we hit the final corner, and yeah, eat snow Impreza. Now we can't be beaten by a car with no vision, so we earn not only victory at this race, but also a like on this video. But if you thought the hard part was behind us, remember snow isn't the only element we have to face here. There is also dirt. This race is where my nightmares were born. Divots in the ground, areas of a track that would slope off to a wall, loss of traction, and of course, other cars. Every single one of these things caught me out about 1 billion times. It got to the point where I finally realised I can't win this race. But if I'm going to be a loser, then I need to channel my inner Brian O'Connor and at least go out with style. That race was our first failure, and for the snow track, we claimed a silver medal. The rest, however, remained as golds. We can't dwell on those results though, as we need to move on to the European 600 Performance Point Clubman Cup. Hey, at least after the dirt events, it can't possibly be any worse. Ah, rats. Right, it's time to pull out the big guns. An old school 911 Turbo. And my pride and joy. If anything was going to stand a chance in this race, it'll be this car. Whew. Here we go. There is no time to play it safe during this race. While Valerio Gallo may have started back in 5th place, like myself, he will be moving through the grid. And once he gets to 1st, he is going to open up a gigantic lead. So we need to get past all of these cars as quickly as possible so that we can minimize the distance between us once we hit second. By the midway point of the lap, we're feeling pretty optimistic. Well, that is until we take a look at the standings and realise that Gallo is in first place and beginning to build out his lead. It's not till close to the end of the first lap that we even catch second place and take that position for ourselves. Now, we've got a lot of work to do if we want to reel in first. If you can't tell, I'm really pushing it. But the risks do pay off, because before you know it, there's Gallo. And after going side by side with him through a few corners, we come out in front. And now, it is very important that we build as much of a lead as possible before that final straight. The reason is because our top speed is so much lower. This is what I deserve for blocking. Now we've got one chance left to regain the lead before we reach the finish line, as we take him on the final S-bend, before coming onto the home straight in first place with a lap time of 7 minutes and 34 seconds. I'll take that. We claim a silver medal for the completion of this race. The remaining races in the series all get golds. So now it's time for us to move forward and see how we get on in sports trucks. That track surface is looking very untar-sealed. Oh, more dirt racing. Fantastic. Okay, I take it back. When you're doing it in a truck, it's actually pretty fun. By the start of the second lap, we've moved through more than half the grid. And after a short-lived fight with 3 other trucks, we move our way through to second. Seriously, this race is so much fun. It's like the perfect ad for a Toyota truck. We spot first place in our rear view mirror. That means we're closing the distance. And as long as we don't wipe out, we should be able to catch him before the end of the lap. We end up absolutely launching ourselves into first place and then taking off to a very commanding lead, bringing us the first successful completion of a rally race. Besides the bronze medal for the dirt track, we end up golding the rest of the events. But now, we're straying into 700 performance point territory, starting with the American Cup. And here's the car we've found to carry us through it. An old school Ford Roadster. This car will get off to a very deceiving start, as even with nitrous flowing into the engine, it's slower to get going than me the morning after a night drinking. We've set the top speed on this car to be very, very high. The reason for this? Well, we're planning to steal that Samba Bus's newfound high-speed reversing record and keep it for ourselves. That's 400, 402, 404, 405. And as before, if you use miles per hour, that is 252. Sorry, Samba Bus, you've been replaced. We not only win this race, but easily clean out the rest of the American Cup. Moving on to the next series, the 700 Performance Point World Touring Car Championship. To complete this, we're going to need to call on an old friend. Welcome back, RX-7. With the race underway, we begin slowly moving through the pack, getting ever closer to those podium spots. And I love this RX-7, it's doing great. But by this point in the playthrough, we have discovered cars that perform better. Now if that's the case, then why are we sticking with the RX-7? Well, that's because of its amazing tyre wear and fuel economy. Now if you've never seen a guy try to strangle a flat screen television, then clearly you were not present while I was trying to get this car into the pits using only reverse. Okay, let's break this down. This is us entering the pits in reverse. Well played, Gran Turismo, but we'll outsmart you yet. What happens if we spin around right in front of the pits and wait for an opponent to ram us in. Ah, you thought of that one too? Well, I guess we're doing a no pit stop run then. We're just going to have to be very economical with the fuel and tyres. Turns out that we are not the fastest car out on the track today, but any of our opponents who are remotely pulling the same sort of lap times as us need to pit at least twice, giving us a decent buffer to work with, as at the end of the 6th lap, any car remotely close to us enters the pits, giving us a nice clear run to the finish line, where we chalk up yet another victory. And not only do we get the trophy, but a clean racing bonus as well, although since we went in reverse, it only records 1.4 kilometers to our driving marathon. Now that race was only completable on easy difficulty, giving it a bronze. The other events in this series allow nitrous, so we were able to complete them on normal difficulty. But now I think we're ready for the big finale, making our way over to the Gran Turismo World Championship. The opposition here are a league above anything we've come up against so far, and that sent us in search of a Halo car. After a couple of dozen failures, we finally found it. The most broken car in Gran Turismo 7, at least when it comes to driving in reverse. A ton of power, not much weight, and a suspension model that is far more forgiving than any other vehicle I've driven. You know it, you love it, the Willys Jeep. Alright, race 1 of the 5 that are contained within this championship, and it looks like it's taking place at Deep Forest Raceway. That is perfect, as it's the track where I do all my testing. Therefore, we know it like the back of our hand. One of the great things about this car is its extremely high top-end speed, easily hitting more than 300 kilometers per hour, allowing us to really push forward whenever a straight comes around. In fact, partway through the 2nd lap, we've already moved up 5 positions. And of course, that was only partway through the lap. By the time it fully comes to a close, we'd taken yet another 5 cars on top of that. Before the end of the 5th lap, we'd continued that progress, moving up to a podium spot, and then overtaking the last 2 remaining cars. With that done, all it took was putting the foot to the floor, and we flew home to the end of the race, claiming a win and adding 12 points to our championship total. Time to hit up race 2 of the championship. So where are we going? Spa. Lots of long straights there. This should be a walk in the park. Just as expected, these straights are a godsend for this car, as it very quickly moves its way through the pack. It even does a pretty good job of holding its own on the corners. As I mentioned earlier, this car is incredibly broken, as it's just so easy to control. Brakes! Forget you saw that. Ah yes, back to our nice, reliable straights. The perfect way to move forward. Eventually, we managed to take first place, narrowly avoiding wiping ourselves out in the process. Ah, and this is how you're meant to take the corner. I'm learning. Race 2, complete. Let's add another 12 points to our total. And move on to Race 3, Circuit de la Sarde. Yet again, a track full of extensively long straights. If the championship continues on like this, then I'm not going to have any troubles. Ah yes, the familiar sight of overtaking cars in a straight line. With a far more powerful car, this is to be expected. Surprisingly enough though, the car does actually come in under 700 performance points. And that got me to thinking, sure, it's got nitrous, but besides that, it's still eligible for the World Touring Car Championship here. So I'm quite curious to find out how close it can get to that 4-minute lap marker. And here we go, we're coming up to the start-finish straight. And we're looking at a time of 3 minutes and 56 seconds. Race 3, complete. Chalk up another 12 points. Race 4 up next, and it's at Mount Panorama. This is a far more challenging track, as not only do we have to navigate our way over the top of the mountain, but even the nice long straights at the bottom are narrow and bumpy, barely wide enough for 2 cars. And if we touch the grass on either side, chances are it's not going to end well. Due to the level of opponents we're up against, sadly, we can't play it safe. So we continuously pull risky moves in our attempts to move up through the grid, ever so slowly getting closer to that first place. Eventually, we do notice them up ahead, and waste no time in making our move. Well done in adding this track to try throw me off, Gran Turismo, but much like Deep Forest, I could do this race blindfolded. Now, why do I say things? I can barely make out the road in front of me. And it doesn't help that my lights are all pointing in the wrong direction. Now it's worse. I'm struggling to tell whether I'm even on the track anymore. Oh, that's the barrier. And it's the only indication to tell me I'm about to hit that long, narrow and bumpy straight. To have any chance of finishing this race in one piece, we got to give up the position. So there goes the new leader, our beacon that we need to closely follow, as he's the only light source we've got. We put the foot down, powering past him on the second to last straight, missing our braking marker and overshooting the corner. If only we'd had the patience to wait until the final straight, then we would have been claiming first, and not second place. Well, at least it's still 10 more points added to our total. And we're off to the 5th and final race. The ring. And it's at night. That could be a problem. But we're not ones to be scared off by a little darkness. So we dive right on in. Hopefully the sun will rise once we get a little bit through the track. For now, we have plenty of cars to use as a light source, as we one by one claim their positions. This is the one track this car does not perform too well at, and we're doing it at night. But surprisingly, this car is putting up a valiant effort. We might just stand a chance. Yeah, 11th place finish. It's not great, and we are awarded no points. But it's not enough to stop us winning the championship, as we claim that gold trophy. So with that, blah 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 blah, credits. Thank you so much for watching. If you remotely enjoyed it, please drop a like or consider subscribing. And we'll see you next time. Bye.